Citing text evidence is a super important skill for students to understand. The older they get, the more this is going to just be expected of them. So you need to make sure your students really get this, especially in the upper elementary grades. My school that I taught at one point took 3 weeks out of the beginning of the school year, and instead of writing essays or doing any other writing, we spent those 3 weeks learning the race strategy, which includes citing evidence, just to make sure kids understood that, because it's a building block for all of their essays, for all of their longer writing, to be able to kind of go through those steps. So one of the prerequisites to citing evidence is that restate and answer, especially in the context of the race strategy, but just kind of in general, because the restate and answer piece of that is going to teach them to start looking at the text, or it can. So sometimes restate and answer is just, hey, what's your favorite color? My favorite color is. But in the context of the race strategy and citing evidence, when you have students restate an answer, you want them thinking back to the text. Even if they're not citing it yet at first, you want them to realize that I need to go look at the evidence. I need to go look at the passage I just read to make sure I get my answer correct. So restating and answering is a prerequisite because it kind of teaches them to go back to the text, make sure your answer is correct, make sure you have evidence, make sure you have proof that what you're saying is true. And the other prerequisite to this is quotation marks. You need students to understand the grammar of using quotation marks before you start expecting them to cite the text. Citing the text is kind of a bigger piece of that. Using quotation marks is a smaller skill, so make sure they have that down first, because it'll make it easier. You won't have to be teaching them to cite the text and what that looks like and the grammar of how to write it. So citing the text, you can start off with it being just a modified version of the race strategy. So instead of restate, answer, cite, explain, you're just having them restate, answer, and cite, just to kind of get them going with this. Eventually, you do want them to explain, but if you're just introducing citing text evidence, stop there and just modify that strategy. So you want them to restate the question, answer the question, and then cite the text. Where did you get this information from? Prove to me that you have this right. And a couple scaffolds that you can use with your students to make sure they're able to cite text evidence is sentence starters. So things like, in the text it says, or the author told us on page 5, and you can find lists of those different sentence starters so that your kids aren't struggling with that piece of how do I write that part. Well, here's the sentence starter, here are some options for you, and then you want to quote the text. Another scaffold is to use highlighting. If they're referencing the text, if they're going back to that passage, especially if it's on a sheet of paper that they have in front of them, they should be able to color code it, to highlight it in different colors and say, oh, here's this question, and here's the information in my passage, in my article, and highlight it so they can see that and realize that those exact words are going in their response to show that they know the answer is true because this information is in the article they read. And then the last step is just to teach this through, make sure they understand it. I use the I do, we do, you do method where you teach and you show. You model that for them. You have them kind of join in and kind of interact with you and do that together, and then you give them the responsibility to do that for themselves. I have some resources for you to be able to do that well, especially those sentence starters. I have a list of those that you can use as a poster in your classroom or a reference sheet in your students' binders so that they can learn how to cite text evidence.